You come home and it's tense. Your partner doesn't say anything, or maybe they do, and it's the wrong thing. You're trying not to snap, but you're already worn super thin. The career is demanding for officers and spouses. When you're finally home together, you don't want to feel tension or like you're on high alert. Home needs to be a safe place for you as a couple, but it often is not. Today, we're talking about emotional safety at home. It's what makes conversations possible, but it's also what lets people stay connected in the middle of chaos. It can also be the first thing to go when law enforcement culture starts seeping into your relationship. We're going to break down what emotional safety is, why you're struggling with it more than you think, and how to start rebuilding it without the drama and without pretending everything's fine. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Code for Couples podcast.
Welcome to the Code for Couples podcast, focusing on topics for law enforcement officers and couples to keep you and your relationship connected, resilient, and code for. Now, your host, law enforcement expert Cindy Doyle, author of Hold the Line, and my wife.
Hey there, welcome back to the Code for Couples podcast. I'm your host, Cindy Doyle, law enforcement wife, retired, and licensed professional counselor. Today, we want to talk about safety at home. What I mean by this is that home needs to be a safe place for you as a couple, but many times it's just not, because there's this bleed over that happens and we can have eggshells. That's a lot of what I'm calling the emotional safety, not just for you as a spouse or the family, also for the officer, and vice versa. The reason why I think this is really important is because there is research that came out in 2020 about compassionate love and first responders. Compassionate love is the kind of love that's not like romantic or sexual, but it's grounded in empathy and care and concern for another person's well-being. In first responders, this type of connection has been shown to protect against depersonalization and more severe mental health symptoms like depression, anxiety, and burnout. In other words, when officers feel compassionate love and they're able to express that compassionate love towards spouses, kids, friends, even peers, it acts like armor against the worst parts of their job, and it keeps them human and it keeps them connected. But here's the problem, right? Because I'm always talking about the problem. The problem is you can't give or receive compassionate love if it doesn't feel safe to be open, right? So if you are not feeling like you can take your wall down or take your armor off, you're not going to want to connect with your spouse, right? Makes sense. Why do I want to make myself vulnerable and do that? So if communication is tense, or if you're shutting down or emotionally ignored, that compassionate love that we need to feel safe gets buried under resentment and frustration and shut down. So while compassionate love is protective, it can't survive without the emotional safety. The real conflict for law enforcement families and for first responder families is that we need that compassionate love to stay resilient, but we need safety to access that compassion. And so if we don't take care of that emotional safety, we're not going to be able to experience that compassionate love or express that compassionate love. If we aren't able to receive or we aren't given that compassionate love, it doesn't feel emotionally safe. So hopefully you get the cycle that we're talking about here and why it needs to be a part of your relationship. That's why we have to actively create conditions at home that allow compassion to come through, even if it's messy or imperfect or awkward. At first, you have to be able to try to express that empathy or that compassion. Oftentimes we fail at that, or I failed at that, or my husband's failed at that. A lot of times what I hear is it's like, I don't want you to fix it. I just want you to listen. I want you to feel the pain that I'm going through. But, many times we want to fix each other's problems. It's hard just to listen and not fix it, especially when you're, a first responder or a law enforcement officer and you're used to fixing everybody's problems, right? So we have to create a system that allows it. Part of it is that you have to be able to embrace or tolerate the tension that you might feel or the uncomfortableness that you might feel, but not fix those things. Communication can't be surface level or sharp. If you walk on eggshells or they do, right? If either one of you is walking on eggshells or you're constantly trying to figure out when it's the right time to talk, but even when things are calm, sometimes it can feel like a connection is missing. And it might be that there's a problem with that emotional safety that you need to bring it up. Or, maybe we're trying to squeeze in the fun in the limited amount of time that we have. I think it's really important to think about emotional safety on an ongoing basis in our relationships because our time is so limited and so valuable with each other. So we have to figure out how to do this. The problem is that lack of emotional safety, right? So we've got to figure out how to do it. It's what allows people to be vulnerable, honest, or imperfect and not fear shutdown on the other end or to be dismissed or punished for bringing something up that maybe it's uncomfortable. In law enforcement families, what can happen is it can erode over time. It doesn't happen all at once. It's a slow slide. It's kind of like a death by a thousand cuts, right? So in trauma or with when I'm speaking, a lot of times we talk about 1,000 tiny drops of poisons or 1,000 different cuts. I like the poison. So if you take like small drops of poison on a regular basis, you're going to wind up feeling toxified, right? You're going to wind up feeling like you're sick. Your body reacts to it. And so it's the same thing when in our relationships that if we have this slow slide or this erosion, then many times we wind up more in a survival mode or exhaustion, or if we have trauma that comes in and it slowly takes over rather than keeping us open. And that winds up causing us resentment in the long run. So, part of the reason why this happens is hypervigilance. I talk a lot about hypervigilance. I will make sure that Nicole drops in a podcast about hypervigilance below in the link. I have several different podcasts about it. But let's talk about hypervigilance and why this armor sometimes gets created in us and why that compassionate love might be difficult to come along the way. So, hypervigilance, what's the problem? We know it's a biological process. We know that on the job, then hypervigilance is what keeps our officers safe on the job. And so they're at this heightened state of awareness. And as much as you might get stressed out at your job, you might have a high state of stress. I would say, like, I have stress on my job. It's hard to listen to trauma on a regular basis. If I know teachers have a hard time, like HR directors have hard times, like nurses, right? Everybody has a hard time, but we don't all experience this high level of hypervigilance on a regular basis, that biological process. We might experience stress or burnout, but this is different. So Dr. Kevin Gilmartin talks about hypervigilance as a biological roller coaster. I love his definition of that, but the ups and the downs, right? On the job, officers are high and alert. They're in a reactive state. They're scanning for threats, managing chaos. And they keep emotions on lockdown, right? Because we don't want them to go around and feel everything. They appropriately put them in a box and compartmentalize it. And we want that. This is what keeps them safe and coming home. It keeps them aware. It keeps them attuned to what's happening so they can react. And it's very functional at work. We want that. But unfortunately, when you pull into the driveway as an officer, what goes up must come down. And so the body crashes. And what that can look like at home is kind of one of two things. You may be kind of checked out because the prefrontal cortex goes offline. Your brain's had a workout for 12 hours, 10 hours, whatever you work. And so your brain's tired. And so the brain says, I need a nap. And you hit the couch or you try to plug into your family, but you don't feel the same. Spouses, you may see them checked out a little bit, like they're not all there. It can also come out the other way where maybe they're staying rubbed up or they kind of lack the ability to have that filter. And so they might snap at the dog or avoid those difficult conversations because they're tired, right? So we can understand that the brain is impacted by hypervigilance. If you're on the receiving end of that, or even as an officer, if your spouse is trying to talk to you and you're getting frustrated, you might get frustrated at or maybe they're getting frustrated at you because you're not listening. It causes a conflict, right? So maybe even as a spouse, if you're not aware of this, or an officer, if you're not aware of this process, watch the podcast below or listen to the podcast below. You may be confused of this version of you because this person is not who you want to show up as, maybe emotionally absent or emotional volatile. But if you don't know why, you just feel like something's wrong. And the assumption is that the relationship is broken or there's something going on between the two of you. But it could just be the hypervigilance. But we bring that into the relationship and then it winds up impacting it because maybe as an officer, you get labeled as selfish or cold, or maybe as a spouse, maybe you get labeled as needy, or maybe they think you're overreacting because they're so chill and calm, or vice versa, right? So that process of the hypervigilance loop could be part of the reason why our emotional safety at home is being impacted. So number 2 is what I'm calling the safety connection loop. This is based upon research and the theory of Dr. Stephen Porges, who talks about the polyvagal theory. And he explains how our nervous system is constantly scanning for safety. When we feel safe, we connect. When we don't, we protect. Do you hear that? I'm going to say that again. When we feel safe, we connect. When we don't, we protect. So the polyvagal theory, there is a nerve called the vagus nerve, and it runs from your brain all the way down to your stomach and your gut. And this is why taking care of your gut is so important. But one of the things that happens during that fight or flight process is your digestive system shuts down. In polyvagal theory, we have to calm that nerve, the vagus nerve that runs the length of your brain stem to your stomach, to your gut. And we have to calm that nerve and let it know that we are in a safe place. If we don't do that, then it's possible that the vagus nerve will stay on high alert. And we need to learn how to calm that down. And there's several different ways that you can do that as a spouse or a officer. When you're both exhausted, then no one's sending those quote unquote safe signals, right? So if I come home and I'm stressed out from my job, or I've been running the household while you're gone and gone to work, right? That's a thing too. Taking care of the kids, taking care of the dogs, gone to the grocery store. And I'm not playing victim. It's just a reality many times. And maybe I'm stressed out and I'm so grateful that you're home, or maybe my stress just boils over. Then you walk in the door as an officer and I'm harried, kind of crazy, hair on fire. And then your whole body is going to say, whoa, this isn't safe. And so my body is going to want to disconnect from that. Our bodies don't naturally walk into difficulty. Now, okay, yes, officer, you've changed your body to do differently. But when your brain is recovering from hypervigilance, it might do that a little differently. So if we don't tell the brain we are safe or do some activities around calming our vagus nerve, then it can get stuck and the nervous system gets stuck. And then the relationship gets stuck and that emotional safety disappears. So if we don't close that loop of safety, that emotional safety, if we don't tell our vagus nerve that we are okay, the nervous system can get stuck and then the relationship can get stuck and then the emotional safety disappears. So once again, we're in this loop of fight or flight and the vagus nerve that is not being taken care of and possibly keeping us heightened and impacting our emotional safety. Number 3 is the communication disconnect. On top of this, right? So we have hypervigilance, we have our vagus nerve, and now we're going to layer in communication. And the communication many times with law enforcement, what you are trying to do is you're trying to be very direct in your communication. You're trying to gain authority, try to get control of a situation, command presence, right? It's kind of direct, no bullshit talk, fast, blunt. It's outcome focused, which is so great for the job, right? So when you're on high stakes calls or when you're in a situation, then it gets the job done. But at home, of course, that tone can feel very cold, dismissive, or even aggressive, especially when the other person is already feeling unsafe or unsure or even hurt. That then continues or kind of perpetuates the cycle that we're already talking about, that emotional safety. I do have a podcast on authoritarian spillover, which Nicole will drop in down below as well. And if you want to know more about that command presence at home, that's a podcast I have as well. Because of that spillover that can happen with the voice or command presence, spouses and family members often adapt by softening or avoiding or walking on eggshells, just trying to keep the peace. Meanwhile, officers can feel like they're being criticized or disrespected, and so nobody wins. This plays out if you have ever recognized that you're, as an officer, that you're not in the loop on some things in the family. This might be a part of it. It's that emotional safety. As a spouse, if you are hiding stuff in the sense of like, let's not tell them about that, they might freak out. Like it's impacting the emotional safety because trust is huge in our relationships. I understand we want to feel safe in them and we have to feel comfortable. And I hope you hear that all of these build on each other. So that hypervigilance, that cycle, that safety connection loop that we talk about, and now that communication disconnect, that this isn't necessarily intentional. Once again, it's the slow slide. So if I don't feel safe saying things, or if it feels like authority, then I slowly, as a human, adapt and find a way to feel safe. It's just the way our brain's wired. It's not necessarily intentional. It's just a system mismatch or poor timing or emotional fatigue, right? But if we don't address that slide in those 3 steps that we're talking about then it winds up with disconnection and resentment and burnout at home, and it just compounds. So what do we do about this? Because I'm all about the solutions, not just telling you what the problem is. So I'm going to give you a couple of different solutions for this if you're recognizing this within your relationships. The first one is we need to normalize the recovery cycle. As a couple, I've said this before, as a couple, talk about your post shift and what that needs to look like. Make sure you're labeling what the emotion is, label what that decompression looks like, and also expect that downside of the hypervigilance. Expect the disconnect. Expect the fact that your brain might not be online, and then work with it. But part of that too is also a spouse. If you're stressed out and you need a little break, then work with that together. Because if I know you need a break and you know I need a break, and we can do that for each other and we've planned it and we've communicated about it, then it's going to make things a whole lot easier. I have even suggested to people to have some kind of a safe word, or like you don't have to explain it. You can just say, I need Snickers time, or something like whatever it is randomly, right? Or I'm running hot is a good one that I like to use. Like I'm running hot. And that's kind of like, oh, okay, you need some time to cool off, right? Turn the burner down or whatever you're thinking of. They're running hot. And figure out how to help each other with that safety that you need to decompress, because both of you have to need to decompress. I really recommend that you use clear phrases about this. It's really important. Don't hem and haw about it or dance around. Just come out and say what you need. You know what? I need 20 minutes to decompress, and then I will come back out and I will jump in and take the kiddo and do the dishes or whatever you need to do, or reconnect, or I'll come out and give you a hug, whatever that is that you need to do to take care of yourself. But you see, I'm really clear. I need 20 minutes to decompress and then I will come back out. There's a time frame. You're not saying like, I need alone time or I need downtime, because what that could look like is, 45 minutes in the bathroom on your phone, right? If you're communicating as a couple about that ahead of time, then that really helps. And I think I have a podcast on this as well. If so, I'll drop it down there in the notes. The other thing you could say is like, I'm not mad at you. I'm just not at a place to talk yet, but I'm not mad. But maybe you're being a giant grumpapuss and you know you know that it's bleeding out or oozing out, right, of your system. And you've had a bad day and you don't want to take it out on your partner or your kids or whoever, but you need them to know, hey, I have not had a good day and I am stressed out. And this is not about you and I might be a little emotional, I might be a little sharp, but I'm not at a place to talk. I love you. I'm just not mad. Being really clear about that is important. That's something that we learned to do in our relationship because I would personalize things when he would be grumpy or short with me. Many times I would think, oh, what have I done? Because it would hurt. It would hurt my feelings, right? It would hurt that I had not seen him and then I'm experiencing this and I would personalize it. But then my cycle in my head was like, you're a insert word here, like you're being a giant asshole or whatever I would think. And so then I would do the shutdown. That was mine, was the shutdown. So, but if you know ahead of time, hey, I'm not mad at you. I'm just not in a place where I want to talk or I'm just in a mood, then I can then give him space or I can hold space if he needs it, right? If he needs to talk or if he needs some compassion and doesn't need me to be sensitive about how he's acting. It doesn't give him permission to be a butthead. And at the same time, I can have compassion and not make him feel like he has to be perfect with us. And he can do the same for me, right? So instead of saying, this is the other thing that's annoying that I really have tried not to do in my relationship. What's wrong? What's wrong? I know there's something wrong because there's nothing more nagging. People will do that to me. I have somebody in my life that tends to do that to me. What's wrong? What's wrong? I'm like, nothing. Are you mad? Are you mad? Are you mad? Well, I am now because you keep asking, right? So if we can identify these patterns ahead of times, it can really help. Number one is normalizing the recovery cycle and talking about that recovery cycle, making sure you say what you need clearly. Don't dance around, just say what you need. Number two is using the 3 C's in communication, and they are clear, concise, and compassionate. So clear, concise, compassionate are the 3 C's in communication. And we've already talked about clarity, right? I already mentioned compassion. So it kind of goes along with what I was just talking about that decompression part as well. When we are this way, then we can do things like we can ask for what we need without blaming. We just state what I need or how I am feeling, right? We can respond with curiosity instead of defensiveness. And if the conversation is starting when one of you is emotional hijacked, then you can hit pause. So, kind of the way this looks is that I'm going to be clear of, hey, this isn't a good time right now. Or, hey, I need to talk about this and this is what it's about. Is this a good time? Clear and concise, right? That compassionate part is the part that's really important too. Maybe I want to talk about something, but he's not in a space where he can listen to me or hear me. So he needs to have compassion that I'm not going to get what I need, and I need to have compassion that he's not in the right spot. And then we can talk about it later or find a time to talk about it. But if this is what I used to do, is I used to like meander in my stories, and he would do if you're looking at my video, he would do the circling of his hand of like, get to the point, which then shut me down, right? So this bad cycle. So if we could be clear, concise, and compassionate, it's really helpful. So here's a couple of examples that I had. I want to talk, but I don't want to shut down. Can we circle back after dinner? So what I'm saying is like, hey, I'm feeling emotionally overloaded. So can we talk about this afterwards? Or if you're feeling shut down, another way of saying that is, I'm not ignoring you. I'm just not regulated right now. Let me take a couple minutes to breathe and then we'll come back. So What that does is it creates a space of emotional safety by lowering the perceived threat. So if we use those that clear, concise, and compassionate, it helps in our emotional safety. It's like it helps you get to the finish line, right? What we don't like to fail in our communication or anywhere really, and so it helps us not fail in what we're trying to do, and it helps to not disappoint on the other end. So success all the way around. Yay. Okay, number 3, build a family crisis plan. Crisis is just inevitable with our relationships, and whether it's burnout or bad call or dips in your own mental health, you have to have a game plan of what you're going to do when somebody is having a really bad day. So I really recommend that you sit down before these things happen. Think about what are the signs of each other? How do you know when somebody is having a bad day or yourself? How do you know when you're having a bad day? And figure out what that looks like, first of all. So figure out what those early warning signs are. Figure out what you need from each other, or maybe there's an ask ahead of time of what you need. The third thing I would say is, who do you call? Is there a friend to talk to? Do you have a peer support therapist, chaplain? Like, how serious is this, that as far as a crisis? Because if somebody is suicidal or if somebody's really depressed, what do you do? I struggle with anxiety, not as much as I used to, but I do struggle with anxiety, and my anxiety will shut me down. And so in those moments, I have certain things that I say, things like I'm just tired, which is a total lie. I'm not quote unquote just tired. I am in shutdown. But it's my way of saying, leave me alone. When I say I'm just tired, because people are like, "Oh, yeah, you're just tired." No, that's like a giant red flag. And so my husband learned that early on, that that's one of my signs of that, like, "Okay, hold on, what's going on?" And so that last one I have is, what helps each of you reset? What do you need to do to hit the reset button? And maybe that's the same one as number 2 of what do you need from each other? What helps you reset is really important. And to know those things ahead of time are important as a couple because it creates emotional safety. I'm going to give you a really dumb example, which is my husband would get grumpy. And I immediately, because I am a mental health professional, would jump to conclusion of, oh, maybe he's struggling with a call, or maybe he's depressed. Maybe, I would come up with all these things. Well, now, you know what I do? The first thing I do when those early warning signs of him getting grumpy come on, first thing I do is, when's the last time you ate? And I will tell you, probably 80% of the time, it's, "Oh, I haven't had anything to eat yet." I'm like, "Okay, let's get you something to eat first, and then we'll see where this goes." But knowing this about each other can take care of so many different problems. So sitting down, having a conversation, if you need to, write it down. If you need to have Post-it notes up or some kind of a cheat sheet for each other, that helps too. I think we're kind of talking about two different things, like real crisis, and then we're also talking about maybe a crisis as far as mood, or, if you come home and it was a bad call or a bad day, what's the game plan? If I know that ahead of time, then I feel so empowered to be able to help you with the problem. But then also, you can lean into me, and that emotional safety is there because I'm not going to misinterpret. I'm going to check things out. And you're not reacting from fear. You're going from a executing a plan, right? You're operating from that plan and not fear. So I think that helps as well. Number 4 is creating rituals. Y'all get tired of me saying this all the time, is creating rituals, but rituals are small, consistent things that build safety, small, consistent behaviors that build safety, not big romantic gestures. I mean, those are wonderful, but those tiny, reliable patterns are often what we need in our life because they create safety, right? If we know something's going to happen all the time, then it creates emotional safety in our relationship. I know if you've listened to me before, I've talked about porch time and how that was something we had as a ritual that when he had time off and I had time off, we would go sit on a porch. Sometimes it'd be in the morning, sometimes it'd be the night, and we would have a beverage and sit and talk. And that knowing that we had that porch time coming up was really important. It can just be simple rituals. Like, what are rituals that you have when you say goodbye? Even if you're asleep, is there a way that your spouse says goodbye to you? My husband would leave early in the morning and I would be asleep, but I sometimes would just feel him touch my head. And what I didn't know is he said he always kissed his hand and then touched my head. But he said he didn't want to kiss me because he didn't want to wake me up. But those small rituals are really important. It can just be small, tiny things, right? On top of that, we have the vagus nerve that we mentioned. One of the best things you can do for your vagus nerve to tell your system, I'm safe, and turn that loop off that we talked about is a 10-second hug. So after work or after that decompression, that you go and grab your partner, you can even grab a kid, you can do all of them, and you do a long hug because that tells your system that you're safe. And it starts to move that away from that fight or flight response, which can make a big difference. I would also recommend that you, at a minimum, do some kind of weekly check in. It can be really difficult to, check ins are good as far as like texting. I get that everybody texts, or I Marco Polo a lot with my friends and things like that. But there's just something about having that human interaction on a regular basis and saying, hey, what happened this week? And it can be I used to call it cloud and sunshine moment, but it can be like, what's your high, what's your low? Those are things that you can talk about. It can be other little rituals. I think of the rituals of memes. My husband and I had these monkeys that we would share with each other. And it was just this ritual. And it was these monkeys running up and hugging each other. And we both found different monkey memes and we would send them to each other. And that was all I needed to like comfort my system, to know that I'm still being thought of and loved. And so it doesn't have to be big rituals. It can be little tiny rituals. Those little tiny things really mean a lot. It can be a shared joke. I guess maybe the meme would fall into this category too. It could be a shared joke or a song or something that's just yours, some kind of little inside joke. My husband and I are always quoting like Talladega Nights or Napoleon Dynamite. And it's just like our little inside joke with each other. And so, American Pie, there's some things in there that we quote with each other. It's just these little tiny things that help remind us of the connection between us. It doesn't need to be 24/7. It doesn't need to be all the time. It's that balance, right? It's small, consistent things. But once again, don't forget your physical touch. I think physical touch is a really important part of our ritual. And it's important for our cycle that we were talking about, that polyvagal aspect. When things are predictable, it elicits safety. And when we have safety, we have that connection. And remember, we're looking at how do we create that emotional safety at home and counteract those other aspects that we talked about at the beginning. The last one I'm going to mention is that you need to check in with your wellness. It's really important. You can't be there emotionally if you're physically wrecked. So you have to make sure that you take care of your own personal house, and that idea that everybody also needs to be emotionally and physically okay is a part of the whole house. So briefly, there are 6 areas of wellness. The first one is emotional, like checking in with yourself. How are you feeling? What do you need? The second one is physical. This one's really important because it can reverse that polyvagal, the vagus nerve aspect. And so doing just something like a 10 or 15-minute walk outside of work or after work, or even on your shift, can help. One of the things that I sometimes do is in between sessions, I'll go just take a lap around the building to just do something physical. That's really important. It doesn't have to be like, if you sweat it out, that's fine, but it doesn't have to be. The next one is financial health. have lots of podcasts about financial health here. Spiritual health, spiritual doesn't necessarily mean organized religion. It can just be like checking in with yourself spiritually. I think this job, not I think, I know this job can be really difficult in regard to, like karma or thinking of a higher being or how can a God let these things happen? And so making sure we are okay spiritually is really important as well. Social is another aspect of wellness. This is one that I'm currently working on myself. I think it is super easy as a law enforcement family to just stay home because it's comfortable and to incubate ourselves with people that are like ourselves. So, unfortunately, sometimes that becomes like a giant echo chamber and can be kind of negative. Make sure you are doing something social with people that are maybe outside of your circle, whether that's just grabbing a cup of coffee. Unfortunately, a lot of my friends live other places, so I'll get on a Zoom call or FaceTime with people. And it's just important to be social and do social things. Social can also be going out and trying something new with your spouse or doing something as a family. That can be social too. It doesn't have to be that you connect with people. It can just be doing something that's outside your comfort zone and getting outside the house. The last one is environmental. So, environmental can be things like, is your space cluttered? Do you feel overwhelmed when you walk in? I used to be the girl that would have piles of laundry places, and I've gotten so much better about that. But sometimes having a space that is clean helps to clean out your mind. And so check those out. Which one's running low? And just pick one of those to take action on, not all of them. But to me, that's a personal thing of checking in with your wellness compass and picking something out that makes sense to you. It goes back to, once again, if you are stronger in your wellness, then you're going to have more capacity for safety and connection. So it kind of goes back to taking care of yourself, takes care of the relationship, and your spouse can be a part of that too. Emotional safety doesn't require that you're perfect. It requires you to be intentional. It requires both of you to understand what's going on beneath the surface and make small, repeated choices that create trust, connection, and safety. It's not soft, it's not fluffy. It's more about how do you protect the family or your relationship from the silent damage that the job can cause at home. Just as a recap today, remember what's underneath it is that hypervigilance, the safety connection loop with the vagus nerve, and then that communications disconnect that can layer on because of some of the conditioned behavior. And those 5 things that I mentioned to take care of it are normalizing the recovery cycle. Talk about it. Use those 3 C's of communication: clear, concise, and compassionate. The third thing is building a crisis plan. What do you do on bad days or when there really is a crisis that happens? Have a plan, and what are those flags and what do you need to do to help each other out? Create those connection rituals, and then the last thing is you have to take care of yourself. So take care of your own wellness as a part of this, and you will help to create that emotional safety within your relationship and with each other, which will keep officers safe and healthy on the job. We're just a huge part of that cycle. Families and couples relationships are just a huge part of the cycle of keeping officers safe, but then also you safe as well, spouses. What I ask is, like, start with one thing from today's episode. Don't try to fix it all. Just pick one thing, one action that you can do this week, and then build from there. I am going to ask you to do me a favor. If this episode hits home for you in any way, I'm going to ask you to share it with somebody else. There are so many people that we can impact just with a podcast or sharing something with them. I do this to impact our community, and I just need your help spreading this to others to let them know. So whether it's another officer, another spouse, whether it's your department wellness or your peer support team or somebody in administration, pass it on to them so they can hear this too and maybe be impacted, or maybe they can send it to somebody they know that this would be beneficial for them to create that emotional safety at home so we can have more of that compassionate love that we know is going to protect our law enforcement officers and their families. If you want more information about this or anything in regard to this, check out my book. It is Hold the Line, The Essential Guide to Protecting Your Law Enforcement Relationship. And that is available on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. A lot of online retailers have it, Walmart, Target, I think, as well. If you are an agency or department and you think that this information is something that you want to bring to your agency or department, then go on over to my website, code4couples.com, and reach out to me, and we would be happy to talk to you about doing a webinar or coming to your agency or department and have a conversation. I hope all of this was really helpful. Please work to stay connected. Our relationships are so paramount in keeping our officers and our communities safe and Code 4. So until next time, I hope y'all keep it Code 4. Take care. Thanks for joining me today. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us. For more information about the podcast or Cindy, check out code4couples.com. All intellectual property rights owned by CRLD2 Ventures, LLC, are protected by the firm of 9mm, 45 ACP, 5.56mm, and 12 gauge.